Well, everyone, it's what are we, November 24th, 2025, Thanksgiving week. Um, I
Only in
want,
the United States.
only the United
We had
States.
our Thanksgiving about 7 weeks ago. That's
Oh,
okay. That's okay. Just had to throw that in. Okay. Us
oh,
Canadians, we go first.
okay, sounds good. Um, I want to show you just because people were not clear, I think, so I want to explain something from last class. Here's one of our listeners sent it to me, but it's called Birkat ha-Oreah, the thing in benching. Now, if you look, and Rabbi Kellen mentioned a lot of the new benchers, and I look, and I have some in the new benchers as well. Right after the Harachamans, you have this passage. You hear a son shelo yivosh ba'al bayit, etc., etc. It's called Birkat ha'Oreach, the blessing of the guests. Now, where does this come from? This comes from here in Gemara Brachos. If you look in um, what is this? 46a. It says that a guest should say as follows. That the master of the house should not suffer shame in this world and humiliation in the world to come. And Rebbe added on to it, V'yitzlach ma'od b'chol nechasav, etc., etc. And that's a text, which it says in the Gemara to say it. And yet, that's what I was referring to, that it's not said. Now it's true. I looked at some old Sidurim, and some of them have it, but typical Siddur does not have it. And none of us, we all grew up saying benching out loud. I can say, I think, without fear of being contradicted, that no one listening to us will have ever said this in school, growing up. And I don't know if I certainly have never heard it said going to anyone's house. It just ceased to exist. Even though and I looked at a bunch of old Sidurim, and they hardly ever have it. Occasionally they do. I also looked today at a couple of Sephardic Sidurim because it's in the Shulchan Aruch. This Siddur, the Od Yosef Chai, this is a modern Siddur, doesn't have it. Rav Mazuz's Ish Matzliach doesn't have it. This Siddur, the Tfilas Yeshurin, which is supposed to be the exact Ashkenazic Nusach from the Rav of Vienna. Those who are on our trip to Central Europe almost 2 summers ago, while we had dinner with the Rav of Vienna, he put together this Siddur, and it does not have it either. Um, in the new RCA Siddur, which I'm holding, it has it. They're bringing everything back. If you look on page 230, it says the Gemara, which we just read, record the following prayer to be recited by a guest for the well-being of a male host. Now, it's not in the old RCA Siddur. It's in this RCA Siddur. Um, that they don't even mention that it's not said, and actually they have later on, in addition, the Harachamans. So the thing is, if you say the Yehi Ratzon Birkas Oreach, then you don't say the Harachaman at Balabait Hazeh. That's the whole point. For some reason, now I'll show you also. This isn't something new that's been forgotten and we're bringing it back. Here's the Mishnah Brura on, let's see, what simon is this? 201. If you look at hey, and this is where the Shulchan Aruch says to say this special blessing for the Balabas. He says both Sefer Lechem Chamudos. Lechem Chamudos is published by, is the work of the Tosas Yom Tov. So we're going back to the 1600s. Actually, though, on Brachos, it's not called the Lechem Chamudos. I think it's there. It's called the Divrei Chamudos. So it's a mistake in the Mishnah Berurah. But he says if you look in the Lechem Chamudos, and I looked and it's there, although Divrei Chamudos, Tama, he wonders, Lama anu mishanim nusach habracha de balabayit mimash shenemar b'shas. Why do we change it? We say this harachamani v'rachas balabais is there. So already we see for hundreds of years no one said this, or most people didn't say it. I mean, that's the Yom Tov Heller already says that. How come he wonders why don't we say the version that the Gemara tells us to? So this might be one of the examples where they're bringing back things that things we don't do, like Chaim Soloveitchik's whole idea. I read you the RCA Siddur. The RCA Siddur says the Shulchan Aruch says this, so they include it. The fact that, despite the fact the Shulchan Aruch saying it for hundreds of years, no one said it, and it wasn't in the typical Siddur. It's not in Birnbaum. It's not in Rinat Yisrael. I mean, it wasn't said. Uh, it's just curious that Art Scroll doesn't reflect on this at all. Um, okay. One of you asked me, we spoke about Rav Kook and the Sanhedrin, that they could make new drashot or change halakhah, which is what what the Gemara tells us, the Rambam tells us we're allowed to. So we spoke about, I mentioned Rabbi Shavat, that he thought that in today's circumstances, the Sanhedrin, one of the things the Sanhedrin would do, because remember, the Sanhedrin is supposed to do things. That's the whole point of having a Sanhedrin. You're not going to appoint a Sanhedrin not to do anything. The whole idea of the Sanhedrin is that they're supposed to continue like the oral law with the way it was, with new drashot and responses to the times, pick up where we left off 2,000 years ago. So Rabbi Shvat says, at least, and all of you can imagine in your own mind what new approaches or ideas you hope a Sanhedrin. Some of you want to get rid of Yom Tov Sheni. Others, there's all sorts of things you want to do, or even add. Right? I told you, Rav Kook says the Sanhedrin will add chumros applicable to a free people in their land. So we saw Rabbi Shvat said that the idea that women are potter or pturot from exempt from the obligation to study Torah based on a drasha in the Gemara, he thought that that's something they would change. Well, one of you asked me, and can a Sanhedrin change it to count women in a minyan, all these things? The answer is obviously, of course they can. Would they do that? Is that something that's good for the Jewish people as a whole? I don't know. Everyone had different views, but the Sanhedrin absolutely can change it. They can count women to a minyan. They can do all that. It's all rabbinic. They can do whatever they want. That's their authority. I do want to take this opportunity, though, to clarify something else, because maybe some of you are thinking this would be a very radical thing, goes against tradition. Well, first of all, that's not a concern of the Sanhedrin. If they think it's important, they can do it. But I have said before, and we know that women generally did not go to shul in the Sephardic lands. But the idea that, and we spoke about Jura, but today they don't go to shul. But this is actually not the way it was years ago. In the Ashkenazic world, women did go to shul. We have Ezras Nashim, balconies for women. And even in the time of the Gemara, so the fact that in North Africa, let's say, women never went to shul, and not even on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they didn't. That's actually a divergence from the tradition, and it was due to the fact that unfortunately they had no education. There's reasons for it. But don't let anyone tell you that women didn't go to shul in the days of the Gemara. I find sometimes people don't realize this, and I want to bring you just a couple proofs of this. And there's many more I could bring, and obviously from Rishonim. But I think you'll find these things of interest. So let me show you a couple things here. Um, the Gemara says if you're in this is in Sota 38b. If your base Knesset was full of Kohanim, so what do? Everyone goes up to Duchen. And then the question of Gemara is, Lemim Mevarchin, who are they making the bracha for? Because who's going to respond? So Rabbi Zera says they're brethren who are in the fields. I guess people in the fields can hear it. The Yerushalmi actually has it a little different there. The Yerushalmi says that who do you make the bracha for? The women and the young kids. And that's how the Shulchan Aruch records it in Orach Chaim 128. A synagogue, the Shakua Kohanim, all Kohanim. I'll read in English. Who are they blessing? To their brethren in the fields. But then they ask, but who answers Amen to them? The Shulchan Aruch combines both the Yerushalmi and the Bavli. Who answers Amen? Because remember, the people in the fields, they're too far away. They can get the bracha maybe, but they can't answer Amen, I guess. So what does the Shulchan Aruch say? The women and children. So you see that the Shulchan Aruch, and he's Sephardic. But if those who've been with us to Spain, you remember the synagogues in, let's say we went to in Toledo, there's an Ezra Nashim up top. So the Shulchan Aruch is assuming that there's going to be women in the shul. Now, take a look at this one. The Hasidim might, in the Hasidic shuls, the women sometimes are in another room where they can't see a thing. That there's a little hole for them to listen to. Those who came with us also to Provence last summer, you remember the women were stuck in the basement and with a little hole that they can hear. But That's not traditional. Look at Masachah Sofrim. What does it say? When you take out the Sefer Torah after you read it, this is Hagbah. It says you unroll it here, Miyad Golel. You unroll it three columns. We know that, and it's elevated so as to show the face of the script to the people standing on the right and left. It's turned around towards the front and towards the rear, for it's a precept for all men and women to see the script. It says it here. Shemitzvah l'choha noshim u'lenoshim l'ros achsav. So we see Masechah Sofrim, which goes back to what, like the 8th century or so, ninth century maybe, that they're assuming that women will be in the shul and they will see when you do Hagbah. So there you got it. I think you can see from this also that the Sephardic, I shouldn't call it Sephardic, it's not Sephardic. The Middle Eastern Sefer Torahs that are in a tick, that's not what's represented here. That separate rolling it for three columns. With the Sefer Torah in the tick, you just hold them up. I don't. That is not the original Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah in the tick is a later thing. It's the original Sefer Torah that Chazal would have used is like our Sefer Torah, and that's what Sephardic Sefer Torah are like. I know people like to say Sephardic Sefer Torah, but what is Sepharad? Sepharad is Spain. If you, I was in the Spanish and Portuguese show a week and a half ago, a week before last Shabbos. Their Sefer Torah looks just like ours. If you go to Morocco and you see the old Spanish Sefer Torah in Spain, they use the Sefer Torah just like the way we use it. This is a Middle Eastern thing with the tick, but it's definitely not the original Sefer Torah. Um, Two more things. Oh, do we have time? Okay, quickly, I'll show it to you because a lot of people didn't understand this as well, so I want to explain it to you. There's a nice article, incidentally, on Wikipedia about Birkat ha-Oreah. We'll close this up though. This we've seen, so we can get rid of this. I'm gonna hold off on. No, okay. Well, we did that. Here, this the whole cross-dressing thing we spoke about. I gave what I thought was a great proof that if it's a question of running outside naked or being, let's say, a burning building or being wearing women's clothing, that you certainly should be able to wear the women's clothing because we wear it on Purim. So what's this about? Well, it's in the Shulchan Aruch, right at the end of the Shulchan Aruch, Orach Chaim. The the Ramah says that here he says Mashanagolish Partsufim, you can wear masks, Baporim, the Gever, Lovesh Simlas Isha, the Isha Klei Gever. Man can wear women's clothing, women can wear men's clothing. It's innocent because of its innocent and joyful purpose. It says, we're just doing it to have fun. This goes back to the Mari Mintz of Padua in Italy, a great, great posek. Not everyone agrees with this, but this is the halakhah in the Ramah. And I want to show you something here. This is a picture which Menachem Butler took years ago. He went to giving Shalach Manas to Rav Shechter, and as a joke, Rav Shechter's wife is put on a talus there. Okay, so that's you might say that's not Begadish. It's certainly maybe not technically Begadish, but it's definitely not the normal way of dressing. And but so you see that on Purim things could be done, but don't say it's not necessarily Begadish. On the pasuk in Devarim, 22 5, where it says Lo yechli gever al isha, a woman should not wear a man's clothing, and vice versa. Look what the Targum says. Targum Pseudo Jonathan. Lo yeh gulayan tzitzis utfilin. Neither fringed robes nor tefillin, which are the ornaments of a man, shall be upon the woman. So we see that the Targum actually says that we don't paskin like this. And if you look at the reasons given as to why women shouldn't wear tzitzis or talit, tefillin, they never cite this. In fact, some say they can wear it, but you see, at least is a view that they can't wear it. If you continue, by the way, in this Ramah, he also mentions that you can wear shatnez on Purim. He says here, "V'chein levisha kilayim derabanan." Unfortunately, the English translation here doesn't have shatnez derabbanan, it just says shatnez. But rabbinic kilayim. What if you want interested in this whole topic? You can read this article a few years ago in Tradition, Unmasking an Odd-Sounding Purim Theory. It's all about this idea of cross-dressing and shatnez on Purim. Um, he explains what is rabbinic shatnez. He says that only a fabric have gone through all three stages, namely combed, spun, and woven together, is shatnez min Torah. If you just put it together, otherwise, then it's like, which I think is the typical shatnez, where wool and linen are together, but they didn't go through. They weren't combed, spun, and woven together. That's only rabbinic shatnez, and totally permissible according to the Rama on Purim. That is, if you want to wear that sort of outfit, and it has it, you can. Um, there's a. I'm going to hold off on the other things I have. I have some other things, but it's already 8:48, so I'm going to get back to that. So let me put this down for next class. And Joseph, I'll get back to your comment next class as well. And I will get back as well to the Dor Revi. Some of you asked the question, well, doesn't the Gemara say that if you are wearing shatnez in the street, you have to take it off immediately? And because it's a prohibition, and the Dor Revi would think not. Dor Revi actually discusses shatnez. Not only discuss shatnez, he also mentions the other issue that Shulchan Aruch says, and I'll get into next class. If you're a Kohen and you wake up and you're not wearing any clothes, you slept naked, and you wake up and there's a dead body next to you, apparently you got to run outside, even if you have no clothes on, because you can't be with the Kohen. Not so simple, though. We'll see what the Dor Revi says, and we'll see what the commentaries say. So in the end, if any Kohanim are stuck with that situation tonight, you can take your time and get dressed, and before you go out, halakhah l'maisa, at least according to the sources I'll show you. Let me just get my books here, and now we'll pick up. I do want to share one more thing, though, before we start. Because we spoke about the last thing we did was we spoke about the Ratzon Hashem, that you have to look for what God's will is, and it doesn't necessarily need to be explicitly written in the Torah, like we spoke about the whole dispute about cannibalism. It's the Ratzon Hashem, that Ratzon Torah. That's the word that Rabbi Weinberg uses. That we know you shouldn't consume someone, even though it's not a technical prohibition in the verse. Explicitly, and according to some, it's rabbinic or even not prohibited at all, technically, but it's still against Ratzon Torah. I want to share one more thing with you. This idea of Ratzon Hashem, to see how far this goes and why it can be radical. I want to show you this book, this very dangerous book, the Meishi Loach of the Ishbitzer, the Mordechai Yosef Weiner. I don't know if Morris Firestein is with us tonight. Sometimes he's with us. He wrote a whole book on the thinking of the Ishbitzer. But when it comes to the Ratzon Hashem, I just want to, and then you'll ponder this. On pages 14b to 15a, listen to what he says. He contrasts the northern tribes, Ephraim, let's say, with Yehuda, the southern tribe. And without getting into his whole drasha about this, he says as follows, that Ephraim was committed just to the halakhah. Whatever the law says, you do. And what is Yehuda? Listen to this. The Shorash HaChaim of Yehuda, hu habit hamid Hashem yisparach b'chol davar ma'aseh. Yehuda would look towards God to know what the proper thing is. Even though he knows what the book law says, im kolzo mabit Hashem yisborach sheyarelo omek emes ba'davar. But you still have to look to God, because it could be that even though the law says one thing, it could be that it says not lamito. Sometimes the law is not really what you're supposed to be doing. And listen to these words. Um, that's how Yehuda lived. L'habit Hashem b'chol davar, to look towards God in every matter. V'lo lisnaig al pi mitzvos anashim umada, not just to follow the written law. Af sha'asa et esmo maaseh kazo, even though yesterday you did it this way. Mikol makom hayom eino rotza lismoch al atzmo. You don't want to follow it just because you did it yesterday. Rak shashem yisparach ya'ir lo mechadash ritzono yisparach. God will tell you what He wants you to do. Ve'inyan hazeh yechayev lifamim, and sometimes this, that is knowing the will of God, sometimes requires you lasos ma'aseh neged halakhah. Sometimes you have to do God's will wants you to do against the halakhah. Ki es lasos Hashem. Uh, so you see why this is such a dangerous book, because once you posit that sometimes the Ratzon Hashem is going to be in contradiction to the halakhah, that opens up a can of worms, and in ladavar sof, you could say, where will this take you? But that's the genius of the Ishbitzer, and his Shlomo Carlebach also loved Ruth. Shlomo Carlebach also loved the Ishbitzer for reasons you can probably imagine, because it's antinomian. But once you say that the Ratzon Hashem need not be identical with the law, that is, the law is the general practice, and for the average person, but sometimes I guess the Nietzschean Ubermensch, the superior man, can move beyond it because he senses what the Ratzon Hashem is. Although this is a Hasidic idea, and the Ishbitzer is not the only one to do it. The Ishbitzer went furthest along this very, very dangerous path. I don't think yet, Rabbi Kelman, anyone's done classes about the Ishbitzer. And there's some people very good at Levi Cooper, by the way. He's called the Maggid of Melbourne, now in Israel. Has written some great stuff about Hasidus, antinomian stuff, and I don't know if he did the Ishbitzer. But for us, we're moving on to chapter 7, beginning on page 127, called, chapter I call is Study of Kabbalah, semicolon, Other Religions. And look, Rav Kook is a great Makubal, great Makubal. The secrets of the Torah, Kabbalah, is very important to him. Of course, so there's a lot more in addition to that, and there's a big debate. How much of Rav Kook's thinking really comes directly out of Kabbalah, or is this just an aspect of him? I'm not going to get into that debate at all. I just want to call your attention to a few things that, oh, sorry, so I just saw it out of the corner of my eye. Morris Firestein's there. Yes, we're very honored that the expert on the Meishi Halakhah is with us tonight, and I'll read your comment a bit later, which is exactly what I said, but we'll clarify it as well. Um, the Rav Kook cites the Ramah. The Ramah says that you shouldn't walk in the pardes, the orchard, until you fill your belly with meat and wine. Now, what is the pardes? That it's on this passage of the Ramah that the Vilna Gaon has his famous comment that about the Rambam. Also, the Ramah, right? They did not see the pardes, but because if you're going to understand it to be science and philosophy as opposed to Kabbalah, then what's the whole point? Why do you have to fill your belly with Shas and Poskim to study this? But on the traditional understanding that Pardes refers to a Kabbalistic learning, and that's they're getting it from the Gemara. The question is then, does this mean really, as it's traditionally been understood, that you cannot study Kabbalah until you're a big, big Talmud Chacham? That would mean that hardly anyone can study it. We know that in medieval period there was rulings against study of philosophy below a certain age, and later they extended it to Kabbalah as well. Uh, you see these people, the Kabbalah Center, they're teaching Kabbalah to everyone, and it was traditionally in certain communities. You didn't have to be a great Talmud Chacham. You could study Kabbalah. You could read the Zohar. The Zohar, let's say in Morocco and other places in North Africa, became just a form of ritual. Even if you didn't understand it, you read it. But so what is it about this? So yes, traditionally we're told in the Ashkenazic world, you need to be big Talmud Chacham before you venture into Kabbalah, and those are what we call the Yechidei school, the special people. Not all Ashkenazim feel that way, and certainly Rav Kook did not. Rav Kook says that the Ramah is only offering a general rule. That generally this is what you should do, but there are exceptions. If someone feels a great inner desire for the Kabbalistic learning, that is, that's what you're drawn to. Rav Kook says that you should do what the Gemara says. Always follow your heart. That's where the Gemara mentions where you should, in terms of where you should put your focus on Torah study. What Rav Kook does is he removes study of Kabbalah from the elite of Torah scholars. He opens it up for ordinary Torah students who have a desire for it. Is this for everyone? Obviously, no. But some, and you don't go ahead teaching it to them. Now, for Rav Kook, every great Torah scholar should study Kabbalah. You can't really find completion unless you study Kabbalah. But Rav Kook is also saying that for the lesser lights, it's there for you if you feel drawn to it. I mean, the typical Lithuanian Torah scholar never ventured into Kabbalah. There were exceptions, obviously. Rav Elyashiv's grandfather was a great Makubal. They call him the Leshem, um, because after his book. But Rav Shlomo Elyashiv. But generally, and you went to yeshiva, that wasn't the thing they did. Everyone, they didn't reject Kabbalah, but the famous expression was "Ein li yesod b'nistar." I'm not involved in this. So there were special people who were, but Rav Kook is willing to open it up to everyone. I do have to say, though, while mentioning Kabbalah, that Rav Kook also shows a side of him that you might be surprised. Obviously, Rav Kook is adamant about the holiness and the profundity of the Zohar, yet he does not insist that it was written in its entirety by Rishon Bar Yochai. As I'm sure most of you know, there is a dogma even that one must believe that the Zohar was written by Rishon Bar Yochai. I, for one, don't understand the process, how a book that appears in medieval times on the scene can then be made into a doctrine, a dogma that everyone has to believe in. And if you don't believe in it, you're a heretic. Like, who has the authority to make such a proclamation? Under what, no Sanhedrin ever made this. So I don't exactly know how in the canons of halakhah that actually works. But this is a common idea. Um, that you have to believe it's written by Rashbi and it is heresy or verges on heresy to think otherwise. Of course, there have been many who did think otherwise. One of those was Rav Kafach's grandfather, Rav Yichya Kafach, uh, the Yemenite founder of the Dardea movement. I spoke about it in this group, Kerem. If you plug in YouTube, Kerem, Bein Torah L'Chochma, it's a group of Hasidim. And I spoke about Rav Kafach. They were interested in it. But we did classes, of course, on Torah Notion on him. Rav Kook writes to Yichya Kafach, and he tries to explain to him that Kabbalah is part of Judaism. It's not some thing brought in from the outside. But he speaks of the authors of the Zohar. He doesn't even mention Rishon Bar Yochai. Now, Rav Kook had a great student. The second greatest student, probably of him is this man here. Let me show you his picture. I thought I had it here. Here, the Nazir, Rav David Cohen. He was a Nazir since 1914. That's before he even met Rav Kook. He met Rav Kook later in 1916 in Switzerland, but he became a Nazir. You can see pictures of him when he was very young as a Nazir. We did classes on him, a couple of classes on the Nazir. Nazir is great. He was so attached to spirituality, very, very holy person. And he was as close as you can get to Rav Kook, although in certain areas he seems to have some individual ideas, like vegetarianism. He's a vegetarian. Rav Kook was not a vegetarian. We'll get to Rav Kook's ideas of vegetarianism soon. What I love about Rav Kook, what I love about the Nazir is, well, many things I love about the Nazir. I told this story, but it's probably been 15 years ago. I don't know if I've told it again. So I don't know if I told it after we did the classes. The Nazir makes his way to Eretz Yisrael, and he's at Merkaz Rav Yeshiva with Rav Kook. He had gone to Germany in 1914, and then, of course, he had World War I and the fall of the communists. He never went, fall of the Soviet, fall of the Tsar, rise of the Soviet Union. He never went back there. Well, he was engaged to a girl. young woman in Russia. He makes his way to the land of Israel, and for 12 years. Look, they didn't know if she'd be able to get out, but he held out hope that she'd be allowed to leave. It took 12 years before she was allowed to leave. Throughout that time, the Nazir kept a picture of her on his desk so that he wouldn't be tempted about other shidduchim or anything. He was loyal to her all those 12 years without seeing her. This is a sort of story that it's such a touching, beautiful story, an example of love. But I know that in the Haredi world, they never would allow such a story, although I don't see exactly what the problem is. I know they have this idea you're not supposed to have love till after you get married, but still, the idea that you're being faithful to, you don't have to put it in terms of love. You could say you're being faithful to your shidduch and you have the picture. I don't even think the Chardal would tell this story of the Nazir putting her picture on. But here's the greatest part of the story. She arrives in they didn't know. They knew she got out. They got like a telegram, but they didn't know what day she's arriving. She arrives with her mother in Yerushalayim, and wouldn't you know it, the Nazir was on a tiny stibor at that time. So after 12 years, his bride finally arrives, but he can't talk to her. So Rav Kook quickly summons the Basin with Pesach Frank, and they got rid of his neder for the day, so he could talk to her. Well, the Nazir, who was a great Kabbalist, Makubal, and one of the three top students of Rav Kook, Ritzi Yehuda, the Nazir, and Rav Charlap. He has a text which has appeared in his handwriting and then subsequently was printed, but it wasn't printed in his lifetime, in which he says, while the spirit of Moshe Rabbeinu and Rav Shimon Bar Yochai is found throughout the Zohar, he mentions the sections, the Raya Mehemna and the Tikkunei Zohar, these texts were written later. He says all you have to do is look at the language and the expressions, and you see they're written later. And in support of this, he cites Rav Yaakov Emden. Rav Yaakov Emden, famously in his Mipachat Sfarim, goes through case after case showing that it's impossible for this to have been anything other than a medieval work. It has references to the rise of Islam and as Spanish words and all sorts of things. Um, More importantly, the Nazir says the fact that they're written in medieval period doesn't detract from their holiness, because these works could only have been revealed from Ruach HaKodesh. So the Nazir, he's stressing something which Rabbi Ben Amozeg also would stress, that the important thing is that Kabbalah is true, that it expresses divine ideas. We're not literary historians here. Who wrote it is irrelevant. Whether Rashbi or someone else, it's not important. What's important is the content. The Nazir adds, however, that the issue, when you discuss the issue of the Zohar's authorship in a critical manner, what happens is that this leads to a collapse of the work's holiness in people's eyes. And he says, because of this, in traditional circles, we can't actually discuss when it was written, because it's going to lead to people not viewing it as a holy sefer. Therefore, he says, those who were aware of the truth, that the Zohar is a medieval work, at least in certain parts of it, it's unclear. It seems the Nazir seems to think that portions of it could go back to Rashbi, but others are definitely medieval. He says, though, that people who understood the problems of the Zohar's authorship, due to a sense of communal responsibility, spoke about it as emerging from Rav Shimon Bar Yochai in its entirety, even though they knew that wasn't the case. But they didn't want, other than the elites, you couldn't let people know this, because if you told the masses that it was written in the medieval period, they won't accept it. They won't treat it as a holy work, even though there's no reason not to, because the ideas are holy and the ideas are expressed even through Ruach HaKodesh. That's what he thinks. Um, so that's significant in and of itself, but even more significant is the Nazir tells us that the basis of what he's writing in this comes from Rav Kook. So we see, based on the Nazir, that Rav Kook himself was not tied to the question of authorship, which, as I said, never struck me as an important consideration at all. The content is what's important. This isn't like Torah Shebichsav, 5 books of Moses, where the issue of the authorship has importance. Okay, that enough with Kabbalah. I only wanted to mention that because I think it's in the book because I think it's really worthwhile that Rav Kook expressed a tolerant view, if you want to use that term, with regard to the authorship of the Zohar. The rest of the chapter takes up, and it's many pages, the subheading Judaism and other religions, because here Rav Kook puts forth ideas that are can only be regarded as radical. Uh, that doesn't mean they're not true, but a radical idea is an idea that hasn't been said by someone before, so that makes it radical. Uh, these ideas, which I'm going to tell you, are not many of them are not repeated later on. That is, we have them in his Guide of the Perplexed, Limduchei Adar, which is written before he comes to Eretz Yisrael, and then we have similar passages from the very early time of his Aliyah to the land of Israel. But in his, let's say, in the 1920s and 30s, we don't see him expressing himself this way. Is this because he abandoned these ideas? Is this because he just wasn't focused on? This gets into the larger question of what you do with contradictions in Rav Kook, or I might put it differently, changes of emphasis in Rav Kook. Um, he never says he abandons them, but maybe he did. It's hard to know, but certainly he said it, so they were legitimate when he said it. It could also be I either was told this by Eitam Henkin or I read it. I can't remember now. That he thought that these ideas are the reason why Limvuche Ador, Rav Kook's Guide of the Perplexed, was suppressed. Precisely because of the ideas we're going to talk about now. I happen to think there's a lot of other reasons it could have been suppressed, but these ideas are going to be fascinating in and of itself. Okay, so let us begin. And Rav Kook begins in a pretty conventional way, where he states that idolatrous religions are not able to offer their believers the opportunity for true spiritual growth. Because for that, you need to believe in one God. Now, if this is all Rav Kook said, then there'd be nothing unconventional there, no novelty. The question we'll have to consider is what Rav Kook saying at all contradict this? Because it does appear to be certain contradictions. Rav Kook, however, does not just stick to that. He goes further. So he says, for instance, that the religions that branch out from Judaism, this can only be Christianity and Islam. There are no other religions that branch out from Judaism. Um, he says that our judgment of them should not be entirely negative. Yes, they have errors, and he mentions their view, for instance, of the value of Judaism, the Jewish people, is an error. The Christian idea that the Jewish people are a fossil, to use Toynbee's expression, and that there is no Jewish people after the coming of Jesus, that the whole point of the Jewish people is now to accept Jesus, and obviously the Muslim view of the Jewish people. These are mistakes. We'll get into Christianity's theological mistake in a little bit. Nevertheless, he says that, quote, the inner ethical state of these religions, Judaism and Christianity, has to be respected. That's despite the fact that they engaged in pogroms and all sorts of bad things. Nevertheless, we're not speaking about the actions in the real world now. We're speaking about the religion. Because not everyone, some people were led to save Jews, let's say during the Holocaust, because of their religion. And religion is because of their Christianity. Religion is what you make of it. A lot of people made a very bad thing about it, but for Rav Kook, you're going to have to distinguish between the religion and the practitioners of it. But just speaking about the religion per se, he says that these religions, Christianity and Islam, have led people to a more exalted life, and that's a statement I think most would agree with. That uh, let's speak about like mainstream religion, Judaism and Islam, not extremism or anything like that, but there's a moral code, and so that's something that needs to be respected. And he says that those who follow these religions are serving God according to their level. This is something that I think practitioners of those religions maybe will be insulted to hear. But from Rav Kook's perspective, uh, these religions are designed to serve a purpose, and not everyone's at the level to move higher. So these religions, that's how he begins. These religions are serving a valuable role. Again, not terribly radical, but already, on the edge. But he goes further. You're sitting down, I hope. Okay. He acknowledges the possibility that the founders of Christianity and Islam, now the founder of Islam has to be Muhammad, the founder of Christianity can only be Jesus. It's not Paul. The Rambam um, thinks that Paul is the founder of Christianity. He says even it wasn't the intention of Jesus to start a new religion, but that's not what Rav Kook is referring to. He's clearly referring to Jesus, and we're going to see the positive and the negative of Jesus. He acknowledges the possibility that these individuals were divinely inspired to better humanity. He's not talking about a revelation in the sense of a scriptural revelation like the Quran. All right, we're talking about God speaking, God guiding people, divine inspiration to work for the good of the world. Um, so here we see Jesus and Muhammad being under God's inspiration to work for the world. Rav Yaakov Emden actually, he would agree with that about Jesus. Now, if that is not enough, he even suggests that Jesus and Muhammad might have been able to perform miracles in order to encourage people to follow them. Um, Jesus and Muhammad perform miracles? What's going on here? But from Rav Kook's perspective, we're not concerned with those religions. God is we're with God. We're the highest of all religions. We're the closest. But God can have relationships with others as well. And if God wishes to bring people to an ethical life, and the vehicle for this is going to be another individual, if God wishes to give that person certain powers, miraculous powers, that's fine. That doesn't take away from our religion. It doesn't people, certain individuals, we believe, Cook would tell you, that there have been prophets in the past of the nations, and they could have the ability to do certain wonders. Now, this idea of Rav Kook, we'll see that it was shared, that there could be miracles. See what page. I don't want to get ahead of myself because I want to discuss it in the context of, I won't, we probably won't get to it today, but I'm going to discuss in more details the miracles, and explain to you based on that, in my opinion, as to not why Jews were led to this. Because Rav Kook doesn't say he believes this, he's saying the possibility, but we know that Jews in medieval times believed that Jesus and others did miracles. And we'll get into that later. Rav Kook here is just speaking theoretical. To say this is a surprising position is, it's one thing to say that a non-Jewish person could do some sort of magic or something, but to say that Jesus and Muhammad, although we'll see that there were Jews in medieval times who thought this, from today's standpoint, this appears quite shocking. But that's what Rav Kook says. Here's the words. It is possible that some, namely these founders of other religions, he mentions other people as well, performed, and it was possible that some tangible wonders were prepared for them in case the people needed to be strengthened in their belief. So already we see that Rav Kook is willing to acknowledge not just alternate divine inspiration or revelations, but that the vehicles of this were prophetic figures who could even perform wonders. He says most founders of the various religions were men of knowledge and upright of heart, and many, or perhaps all of them, merited Ruach HaKodesh. Wow. Ruach HaKodesh for the founders of the various religions. In fact, in Vuchei Ador, he speaks of the possibility that they had prophecy, which is higher than Ruach HaKodesh. And he says that this provides a basis for tolerance because we don't need to oppose other religions. As long as the other religions are ethical, not only do we need to oppose them, we don't need to oppose their stories in which they speak about miracles performed by their founders. That's for them, not for us. He continues, that when it comes to religions that are untainted by idolatry, they are to be regarded as worshipers of authentic, divinely inspired religions. So you have religions which don't have idolatry, and they're serving humanity. These are to be seen as authentic, even divinely inspired religions. The problem, which we're going to get into now, is that it's not so simple because you have a religion, like the way he describes it, Christianity, that begins in one way, but over time, idolatry seeps into it until they have a full-blown doctrine of a man God who is worshipped. Nevertheless, even with regard to all the religions that started pure, Rav Kook seems to think that all the religions that are idolatrous started in a pure sense and then over time became idolatrous. Even those, however, we're going to see have a value. We'll see if we get to it today. But either way, you're going to see this is going to be quite surprising. Because if there's one thing you know in traditional Judaism is that idolatry or avodah zarah, which is foreign worship, it doesn't have to mean we translate idolatry, but it's not always idolatry. Foreign worship. I mean, if you believe in multiple gods, there's no idolatry. You're not worshiping idols if you don't have idols, but it's still avodah zarah. But idolatry, we use the term to encompass everything. So these religions that begin not idolatrous, as I said, they're divinely inspired religions, and therefore there's no need to reject for non-Jews to reject them. What's the source of this? The Gemara tells us that we don't teach non-Jews Torah. Why don't we teach non-Jews Torah? We could enlighten them, bring them to the true religion. And Rav Kook says that really non-Jews are not supposed to come to Judaism. They should be able to find fulfillment in their own religions with wisdom and piety. And if you tell me, well, they have idolatry in their religions, so well, as we'll see, there's still value in their religions for them. There is a problem in Rav Kook in that fine, he's gonna talk about all the value in these other religions for non-Jews, even with idolatry. But if at the end of the day, idolatry is forbidden for non-Jews, then why wouldn't we want them to move away from it? It's as if he's saying that they should be able to find fulfillment even in a religion of idolatry, and that over time, this religion of idolatry will improve itself and cleanse itself of the idolatry. But that doesn't change the fact that you have, let's say, John Doe here. He wants to convert to Judaism. If you say no, you discourage him, he remains in a religion of idolatry. He's violating one of the Noahide commandments. So why not welcome him? I mean, but that's not just Rav Kook's problem. That's sort of the problem of all Orthodox rabbis. When a non-Jew comes to the Orthodox rabbi to convert, the first thing the Orthodox rabbi does is push him away. Well, why push him away? Uh, I guess you'd say we don't have enough rayos. We don't have a responsibility. But so in a sense, maybe Rav Kook is not any different than that. But he says that we don't want the non-Jews, but not because they're not going to be good Jews or anything like that, but because they should be able to find fulfillment in their own religion. Yes, Judaism is the highest religion, the source of divine light in the world. But conversion, he says, is only for special people, not the average person. Um, as a general rule, people are to remain in their native religions, and they can find fulfillment in those religions. He says, quote, every religion has some value and a divine spark, and even idolatry has a good spark because of the small measure of morality it contains. Even idolatrous religions teach people a certain moral code. They might be afraid that this God is going to be upset with them, but it teaches them something. He says there's a divine light, a divine spark in all things, in all the different religions. And it obviously shines clearer in the more advanced religions, but in the less advanced religions, it's also there. So the people who are not advanced, look, if someone becomes very advanced and is not part of that whole culture anymore, he's the sort of person that we would welcome into Judaism. But the average person, Rav Kook feels that coming into Judaism, it's not going to be a help to them. It's going to destroy their understanding. It's not going to work. They should remain, and they're going to be in the best place they could be in their religions. Um, he says, even in the most vulgar idolatry, you have a divine spark because people are trying to connect with some higher power. And Listen to this. Regarding most of the religions, it's possible that they are good considering the state of the nations that adhere to them. So we can't look at another religion and say how primitive it is, how gross it is, all that, because we're looking at it from our standpoint all the way up here, connected to God, monotheism. But the people who are involved in that religion, they're not at our level. And therefore, for them, that religion works. And he says when we speak negatively of other religions, it should only be about the negative manifestations in the other religions. For example, immoral behavior, but not the religion per se, because the religion per se is valuable for those people. I don't know anyone in traditional Jewish thought who speaks like this about even idolatrous religions, but Rav Kook does. And Rav Kook even he cites the famous pasuk in Micha, chapter 4. Let all people walk, each one in the name of its God. Let all the people walk in the name of its God. We will walk in the name of the Lord. That pasuk seems to be saying that it's okay for the nations to follow their own gods. Now, not everyone interprets it this way, but the Pashtanim, like Abarbanel others, they see this as like a divine tolerance for nations who are not yet ready for monotheism to remain in their idolatrous state. So how is it possible, though, for a traditional rabbi, this is what I ask, an halachic scholar, to have such a tolerant attitude towards idolatry, since idolatry is the ultimate sin, not just for Jews, but for non-Jews also. And Rav Kook himself elaborates on how meaningless idolatrous is and idolatry is. But he also says that he says, quote, the ladder of human progress requires the existence of idolatry for a time. Idolatry will one day be removed, but it takes time, and certain people are in need of it at the where they are at this moment. For some people, the only way they can recognize the divine is through this the dross of idolatry. Eventually, they'll be led to a pure understanding, but not yet. And in support of this radical approach, he cites the Midrash. The Midrash portrays Avraham as being worried that he's not worthy of being God's chosen one because he, in his youth, had worshipped idolatry. And God responds to him that with a pasuk to him. That's the dew of thy youth. Just as dew is a sign of blessing to the world, you are a sign of blessing. So you're like dew. You know, dew's a sign of blessing, you're a sign of blessing. Now, Rav Kook understands his Midrash to be teaching not that Avraham is a blessing despite having worshipped idols. He says it's precisely the years that Avraham worshipped idols that's going to be the blessing because it provides fertile ground for a purified belief to emerge and all the reasons that can be given why, that the advantages that a Baal Tshuva has, that he can appreciate things others don't. You can go down the list. But Rav Kook states that precisely because Avraham came from a culture of idolatry, he was uniquely qualified to bring the message of monotheism to the world. Now, when will this future perfection of the non-Jewish religions occur? Rav Kook says after the return of the Jews to the land of Israel, which is happening in his lifetime. Then he believes that there will be growing spirituality that will sweep the world. But before this time, and as a temporary measure, religions which encompass various forms of avodah zarah are not merely tolerated by Rav Kook, but seen as serving an important purpose. And that's what Micha is referring to, the prophet, that each nation goes in its own way. I actually think that Rav Kook is unique among all rabbinic figures in his appreciation, not just for of religion for non-Jews, even if only temporary, because Judaism is the only eternal religion. But I mean, the standard rabbinic approach has always been to focus on the Noahide laws. That is, you have Judaism, you have Avodah Zarah, and you have the Noahide laws. And if you don't follow the Noahide code, then you have no religion of any value. It's all negative. Rav Kook is saying that even for religions in violation of the Noahide code, they still have value for non-Jews. Um, Not completely false. These religions have value. I want to read you a passage here. As my book was going completing to the end, Alon Goshen Gottstein, using the exact same text I did, published an article on Jewish theology of other religions, and listen to what he says about Rav Kook. He sums it up. Rav Kook opens up a genuinely pluralist approach to other religions based on notions of multiple revelations, righteous individuals, wisdom, and the recognition that all is under God's guidance. And finally, the divine love and concern for all. That last point of Goshen Gottstein is worth mentioning because often in traditional circles, the idea is that of all the 7, 8 billion, whatever 8 billion we have in the world today, it's only our 15, 16 million small Jewish community that has a connection to God. No one else has anything. And everything revolves around us completely. No, Rav Kook's saying is that other religions, other peoples can have their own connection to God. Yes, our connection is a pure, higher form, but they too can have a connection, and it doesn't need to be through us. Now, just 2 more minutes and then we'll stop. There were other rabbinic figures, true, following the Rambam, who saw the Rambam and Yehuda Levi. Could be the Rambam's influenced by Yehuda Levi on this, although he never mentions Yehuda Levi. The Rav Kafach thinks these ideas were just in the air. Both of them think that Christianity and Islam are steps on the path, like to the messianic improvements of the earlier pagan religions. The Rambam sees it as a step on the path to the messianic era, but that's really nothing to do with what Rav Kook is speaking about. When Rav Kook says that the founders of these religions could have been divinely inspired. Um, when Rabbi Sachs, and I'm happy to say that this book is a finalist. There's one winner and two finalists for the Rabbi Sachs Booker Prize. And actually, I'm very happy because the other two books are books really about how to be Jewish in the world. It's about more books about Judaism in the modern world, sort of one by Sarah Hurwitz and the other, I forgot his name. He was ambassador to Canada. No, where was he? Ambassador to the UN? I forget now. No, it was the Israeli ambassador to England. Sorry, and but my book's a book of scholarship, so the fact that they chose that, I'm very happy. And in the book, I say Rabbi Sachs, when he wrote his Dignity of Difference, which he then had to retract, he says things very similar to Rav Kook. But we know what happened. The outcry in the Haredi world, especially, was so harsh that he had to withdraw the book and substitute to get rid of everything radical he said. And yet, much of what he said can be sourced to Rav Kook. But of course, it wasn't published, so he wouldn't have known this. But, in Dignity of Difference, version 1, he speaks about God having independent relationships with other nations, and that we could speak in terms of revelations of other nations, etc., etc. In Dignity of Difference, version 2, that's all been removed. And what's taken its place is the Noahide Code. That when non-Jews follow the Noahide Code, then they're in relationship with God. But that defeats the whole purpose of the book. The whole point of the book was that they could have their own relationship with God, even not connected in any way through the Torah or through the Noahide Code. So we're going to stop here, and we still have a good deal more to do. Going to speak idolatry and the some of the important things he says about more important things he says about other religions. Also, what about the land of Israel? Are we supposed to get rid of all the inhabitants of the land of Israel? And then we'll get into other ideas of his about Jesus, because Rav Kook was fascinated with Jesus. And where did Jesus go wrong? And where did Christianity go wrong? Is it theology? Is it in practice? And how are we to judge someone like Jesus? Rav Kook says, he says amazingly, we'll get back to this, but I'll just whet your appetite. If you have a piece of gold and you make gold, you turn it into an idol. Well, then obviously every time you think of this idol or pass it, you have to degrade it. That's what you're supposed to do. But if you take that idol and then melt down the gold, then you can admire this gold. It's nice gold. And the same thing we're going to see with Jesus. We can't speak about anything positive about Jesus, any of his ideas as being good, because they've turned him into an idol, a form of idolatry. However, when the time comes that they no longer worship him as a god, as an idol, then we can actually look again at Jesus. And you never know, maybe there's some good ideas he has there. But until we get to that point where he ceases to be a foreign god, it has to be complete negativity towards him. Now, Rav Kook, when he writes this, he's writing, I think it's maybe to the masses. We'll see, though, whether Rav Kook, in writing to the elites, is willing to be a little more tolerant and even acknowledge that with Jesus, maybe we can find us Yechidei Skula, even some positive things to point to. And then, of course, we'll see Jesus' great fall and why he was not able to achieve that which, had he kept on the straight and narrow, he would have been able to. Okay, some time flies when you're having fun. So this was good. So um, let's see, go through the questions, comments. MJ Frankel, you say, on the other hand, the spy holes in the Outnoise show are not much of advertising for Ashkenazi medieval access for women. Yes, that's, although I will say that those spy holes, at least you can see when the Torah is lifted up. And, they could at least, you could see through that. Anyone who's been to the old Ashkenazic shows knows that women were pushed out but at least they could see. And that's why we changed it though today, because today no one, at least in the modern circles, we don't want to have shows like that. But at least the women were there. Aviva Zormer loves the Mei Shiloach, and you do too. Okay, well, lots of people love the Mei Shiloach. So Janine says, how is the average person to know what is the will of God in a particular situation? Well, the average person's not supposed to know. That's the point. This is only to use the Nietzschean phrase, the Übermensch. Um, and Morris, the expert on Mea Shiloach, says he also explains that this is not for everyone. There's a complicated process one must go through to validate that it is true with the Ratzon Hashem. Yes. So if you aren't sure, then you're not the person. It's like that old commercial. If you have to ask how much it costs, you can't afford it. If you are not sure, then you have to follow the regular law like everyone else. Only certain special people. And look, we've spoken, and I've mentioned this before, that even the great Pinchas wasn't aware of this, because the way the Meshiloach reads the Pinchas and the Cosby story, Cosby was actually a tzaddik, and Pinchas, and he was doing what he had to do. In fact, these great tzaddikim lose their free will. They're completely under the will control of God. Pinchas was the nar. He didn't understand what was going on here. And so certain, and you see this in other Hasidic thinkers also. I mean, there are other Hasidic figures. In my book, Changing the Immutable, I gave an example where one of the Rebbes decided that it was time to end the fast. Yom Kippur, and yet it was completely light outside. But he saw that in heaven the day had ended. So you can't do that. I can't do that. But and you and the Misnagid is going to look at him and think that he's insane and that he's simply deluding himself. But in certain circles, the idea is that the Ratzon Hashem you can move beyond. There's a whole tradition of antinomianism. And Morris says too many people pick and choose what he says without putting it into the context of his thought as a whole. Yeah, it's hard to see how any individual could actually adopt this approach and be the antinomian figure, because you would be the figure. You'd be doing it consciously, and therefore you'd be the sinner. But look, we can't get into it now, but it is fascinating and subversive. Susanna says you saw advertised classes for Kabbalah on the bulletin board in the synagogue in Madrid. I don't know. Do we consider also Chabad when they teach Tanya? Is that considered Kabbalah? I guess it is Kabbalah, and that's for everyone. You can go to the old city of Jerusalem today, and you can find all sorts of classes on Kabbalah for everyone. I'm not talking about the Kabbalah Center, which really isn't even for Jews, but so there's a different tradition. Morris, you say the irony is that even though contemporary Orthodox Jews not study Kabbalah, their religious practice is completely suffused with Kabbalistic practice. A simple example is the process of putting on tefillin is completely Kabbalistic influence. And every single Friday night with Lacha Dodi. And although he doesn't mention it, I will plug a book here. Um, if you'll allow me to, let me pull it up here on Amazon for all of you. So here you go, all of my friends. Anyone who's interested in this true and fascinating point, here is Morris's one of his many books, Jewish Customs of Kabbalistic Origin. As you'll see, you can read about Kabbalah Shabbos, inviting Ushpizin, Tikkun Shavuos, and on and on. So that is the great irony that contemporary Orthodox Jews do not study Kabbalah, but so much of what they do can be sourced in Kabbalah. Not just can be sourced, the basis of it is Kabbalah. There was this guy, one of these anti-Kabbalistic people, he wanted to put together a siddur, just like a pre-Kabbalistic siddur, removing all the Kabbalah there. And I said, he asked me to look it over. I said to him, it's impossible. You can't get rid of it. It's part of our davening. I'm not just referring to getting rid of Brich Shemay, for instance, which the London Minhag doesn't have. I'm talking about anything from Kabbalah Shabbos to all lots of things we do. It wouldn't be the same Judaism. So whether you know it's Kabbalistic or whether you believe in it, it's part of our tradition now. Frankel, MJ Frankel says, but that seems mostly to be tweaks in precise operational formats of mitzvahs, various minhagim of davening or burial and other daily observances, rather than psak on fundamental mitzvah performance. Yaakov Katz has written on the nature and degree of Kabbalistic influence on halakhah. Most of the time, we assume that if it's a dispute between halakhah and Kabbalah, we go by halakhah. Some Sephardim think you go by Kabbalah. We go by the halachic sources. But yet, there are plenty of minhagim and plenty of things when the halacha doesn't speak about it that al pi ha-Kabbalah we have adopted it. Look, the five knots on the tzitzis, aren't they also based on Kabbalah? I believe so. They're certainly given justification for that. In fact, the only place in the Shulchan Aruch where he mentions Kabbalistic concept, the only place, and he was a great Makubal. In fact, a Magid would visit the Yosef Karo. He says that the ten, he says that the strings, not the strings, the knots are parallel to he calls it Havayos, which means the Sphirot, as I recall. That's the only time though he mentions it. Dov says, doesn't Rav Kook's opinion of other religions follow from the censored sections at the end of the Mishnah Torah? That's what I mentioned at the end. I don't think so, because he goes much further. All the Rambam is saying is that God, through his providence, ensured that these religions would bring people, would Islam, for instance, is monotheist, and Christianity has an idea of revelation. So they move people in the direction towards monotheism from paganism. So that's a very important thing, and it's included in what Rav Kook says. But the idea that the leading figures in these religions were divinely inspired, and that you don't find. And then he goes, the Rambam is only speaking positively about Christianity and Islam. But the Rav Kook is speaking about all religions as having some value. That is, I would say, religions, enlightened religions, let's put it this way, or religions, uh, the sort of religions that Gandhi would refer to as true religions, a religion that in which you take people and sacrifice them, or do terrible things. That doesn't count. But religions that are edifying and that inspire their people to lead better lives. Jack, what other religions don't follow Noahide laws? Well, today I think we might say that all religions follow the Noahide laws to a certain extent. It gets tricky about the laws of Avodah Zarah. But in the olden days, every religion that was an actual religion of Avodah Zarah was violating the Noahide laws without exception. Um, the question is, you take religion like Christianity. On the one hand, there's Avodah Zarah, but we have this notion that we spoke about so many times, which Rav Kook accepts, that non-Jews are not obligated in what we call shituf. That is, if you believe in one God but multiple parts, that's okay. So, and Hinduism would also fall into that category. So today, looking around, I don't really see any religions of Avodah Zarah out there. But in the past, there were. Jacob says, do you think Rav Kook's pluralistic views of other religions is just another manifestation of his tolerance for the secular Zionists and his ability to see the positive in their endeavors, or are they categorically different? It has nothing to do with secular Zionists. What it has to do, however, I would agree, is that Rav Kook is able to look at everything with a different eye. Rav Kook says every nation has something to contribute, and something unique, actually. Every individual has something to contribute. So if every nation has something to contribute, what do you do with all these nations, the 99.9% of the world, who are involved in avodah zarah? So when you have that approach, that sort of approach leads you to secular Zionists as well. Yes, they're rejecting Torah, but is that the whole story? Or is there something deeper inside? Just like with the secular Zionists, they reject Torah, but really there's something deeper inside that they're bringing value to the Jewish people. So too these other nations. On the surface, yes, they accept the one God, reject the one God, they accept idolatry, but is that all there is to it? Rav Kook is always looking under the surface, and under the surface, you see there is value there. So in that sense, they are related. Look, from a standpoint of Kabbalah, there's going to be holy sparks in everything. You just have to find out what these holy sparks are and draw them out. Franco, you say melting down your gold idol, enjoying the gold doesn't work. As Maseches Avodah Zarah discusses this at length, and Jews can't cancel their own Avodah Zarah. No, if the non-Jews melt it down, yes, we can't cancel. If we grab it, we can't melt it down, and we can't be mevatel. If I said otherwise, I misspoke. The non-Jew, because if they melt it down, then they're being mevatel it, so that it's bittul avodah zarah. So then we can admire it. So too, if the non-Jews decide that they become Unitarian, let's say, and he's no longer a god, then we can look and examine. Maybe he has some good things to say, some good messages. Not that he's our rabbi or anything. You should know that in the non-Jewish world, they refer now to Jesus as a rabbi. It's very common to say that he was a rabbi, because what's a rabbi? A rabbi is a teacher, and the whole trend today in New Testament scholarship is not like it used to be to see Jesus as an opposition to Judaism, but no, to see Jesus in his Jewish context, really as a Jew. So therefore, he'd be a rabbi, just an unconventional rabbi, a rabbi who differs from the Pharisees in certain areas. Herb says Elijah C. Soloveitchik wrote The Jewish Jesus, Commentary to Gospels, all positive, grandson of Chaim Volozhin. Yes, and you can get that book now translated and with a commentary by Shaul Magid. Herb, I actually am happy to say that I was the first one to write about Eliyahu Soloveitchik on the Sfarim blog in English. First one, I years ago, Dov Hyman had written a Hebrew piece on him as well. What Eliyahu Soloveitchik does, he's he's in the same family of the Beis Halevi. He's a cousin of the Beis Halevi. He wrote a commentary on the Mishnah Torah. What he's doing is following Rav Yaakov Emden, and he says this right in the introduction. The idea of Rav Yaakov Emden explained that non-Jews, that the Jesus' message and what Paul was doing, this was all for the non-Jews. That is, uh, Jews have to keep their law, but non-Jews, in order to civilize them, that's what the message of Jesus and of Paul is. It's only directed to the non-Jews. So the New Testament, in this understanding, is a kosher work. Now, if I speak at another one of the Torah Motion December 25th conferences, I will not be able to do it this year, I don't think, because I'm going to be overseas in a strange place. I'll let you all know later. But I already prepared my whole talk. So one day I'll do it, maybe do another time. And I look at Jewish approaches, unusual Jewish approaches to the Gospels and to Christianity. And I look at three people, Rav Yaakov Emden, Rav Eliyahu Tzvi Soloveitchik, and one other person who wrote a commentary on the New Testament. So these are very interesting figures. With that, we come to an end, and I thank you all again for coming out. And Rabbi Kelman.
As we discussed last year, I'm holding this book. Oshmo had put out
Ah, yes. I
that.
have the English version of it.
Oh, I didn't know there is an English
Yes,
version.
they translated English. It came out this year. Yes.
Okay, that I didn't know. So this is a book of articles, basically very liberal approaches to other religions. That it was sent to me. It's put out by Or Torah Stone, I believe.
Yeah, or Torah Stone, edited by the person who spoke for last year.
Yaakov Nagain, yeah, who
Yeah, not
spoke
coming
for,
again.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
there's a chapter in there
I,
on Rav Kook, which if I didn't
yes,
get to
very
until after my book appeared.
So I didn't know the book's in English. It's good to not know
Yes.
it's called in English, but in Hebrew here it's called Ushmo Achad. But that's okay if you want to see more liberal views on other religions. Okay, thank you very much. Tomorrow, of course, at 10 in the morning.
By the way, Rabbi Kelman, hold on. Before you go, though, I'll show you just in case people want to see it. Here it
Sure.
is. An entire book on God shall be one. An
Yeah,
entire
it's
book
Ushmo Achad. It's that's the
yes,
translation of the title.
on more liberal approaches to religion. Here's the chapters.
Rifui Akesher Ben Yisroel V'Datot Haolam. Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
here's the chapters. Prophetic models for the seven Noahide laws, but then Yehuda Levi, Netanel ben Rabbi Fayumi. I'll speak about him next class
Rabbi
because
Yaakov Emden is quite
yeah,
to say he's liberal is
Maimonides,
an understatement.
Yiri, Yaakov Emden, Christianity
Right,
is a positive force for Ben Mosig,
right.
Rav Kook. Again, I didn't have access to this when I wrote my book, and Jonathan Sachs's approach to other religions. So, those who are interested in this topic, thank you, Rabbi Kelman, for sharing that. Definitely worth seeing.
Yeah. Okay. Like I say, Dr. Sokolot tomorrow at 10 in the morning on the Piyut and the Parsha, and then Rabbi Shul 1 o'clock say for Yeshua. All the regular classes, Dr. Rabbi Helfgott is not parent teacher interviews, I think, this week. So he's not speaking, or Thanksgiving. I don't know for what. Yeah, Thanksgiving Thursday. I forgot that you said at the beginning. Anyways, he's not giving his class Wednesday night. I think has a wedding. But anyways, but all the regular classes will continue. Shuli Mishkin will give her class on Thursday for Israelis and Canadians. It's not Thanksgiving. We do Torah as regular. Okay, everybody. Hope to see you soon. Please invite a friend to join us. And everybody have a great day, great week, and share good things. Thank you. Laila Tov.
תודה רבה. תודה רבה.
Bakasha. Erev Tov. Okay.